Hey, it's the Poor Sports Seattle podcast, and we're back. It's Casey McLean. By the way, come see me do stand-up comedy if you would this week. I'll be in Anacortes, Washington at a brewery on Thursday. I should figure out the actual name of the brewery. Let's do that in real time. By the way, if you're listening to this live, I'm at Tacoma Comedy Club tonight for their St. Patrick's Day show at the 6th and Proctor location. Come on out to that. It's going to be a fun time. An all-Irish last name comedian lineup. So come out to that. If that's your thing, I will do, this is what I'm pledging to you. It's a free show. Rare that I would do this. I typically do not drink on stage. I'm drinking on stage tonight. Okay. Not a lot. I'll have a beer up there with me. Maybe a Guinness. Maybe I'll have a whiskey up there. So come on out to that St. Patrick's Day show at Tacoma Comedy Club, Anacortes on Thursday, and then on Friday I just added this show. I am opening up for Dr. Brady Smith at the Chalet Theater in Enumclaw. He's a dentist who has become well known, famous in this area for providing free dental care to. I don't know if this is true anymore. By the way, I'm not getting free dental care out of this deal, but he provides free dental care to comics who do his podcast, or he has historically anyway, including, by the way, and he talks about it on a special. I know people are very sensitive about cosmetic or dental stuff. I'm not breaking any HIPAA laws. Andrew Rivers, past podcast guest, is who hooked me up with the gig, and he got some dental surgery from Dr. Brady Smith. So if you want to see the comedian who did dental surgery on Andrew Rivers, friend of the podcast, come on out to that. It's going to be a fun show. And Enumclaw, that theater is always wild. It's always a wild group of folks. I'm hoping, by the way, that it attracts, not to disparage Enumclaw in any way. He says he has a very dental focused crowd, like it's a lot of dentist office employees, which is great. Please, these Enumclaw people have seen me a lot of times. So, coming out to that. Anyway, we're going to talk about a lot of stuff today. We're going to talk about the news that came out about the Sam Darnold contract, the guaranteed money that I think was intentionally obscured from the reporting, which is, by the way, I think what also happened with DeMarcus Lawrence. It's also what happened with Cooper Kupp. It's still going on with Cooper Kupp, and we're seeing more and more of this. These like inflate. We saw it with Geno Smith on the last contract he signed with Seattle, right? It was reported as like 3 years. 3 years up to $100 million. But it was these very difficult to hit performance incentives. Was not guaranteed to be 3 years. It was not guaranteed to be $100 million, obviously. And Sam Darnold's situation isn't that much different. The Cooper Kupp situation, I would expect, we'll talk about it in a moment, but I'd expect it's one of these contracts where this might not even be almost. I think there's a good chance these agents and these teams make some kind of a deal of like, please don't announce. Give it like a full news cycle before we announce the guaranteed money, because the agents want to look good. They want to be able to go say they got the highest annual average value possible for their client, even if they amount to 1 or 2 year deals in a lot of cases. And so the Seahawks, I think it's interesting to see how people are analyzing their free agency at this point, because it was pretty gloomy a week ago, right? Like, people were pretty upset with the way the Seahawks had handled their free agency a week ago, and now it's less gloomy. And part of the reason is Tevin Jenkins is in town. There's some optimism that the Seahawks are going to make a real investment to address their offensive line woes. Some of it is people are very excited to see Cooper Kupp return to Washington State. Some of it is people remember DeMarcus Lawrence from 2017. I guess, I don't know. They're very excited. I reacted live to the DeMarcus Lawrence news Thursday, the last day Wednesday, the last day I recorded, which I believe it was like hours after, maybe minutes after the signing had been announced. And on the surface, it seemed like a lot of money to me. But then you found out it's like really a 2-year, $18 million commitment. That's fine. That's not, it's probably not somebody that I would have targeted. And I certainly don't think it's someone who, I don't think anyone had like invest a ton of money in edge while we don't know what the situation with Uchenna Nwosu is, but obviously the Seahawks know more about what they're going to do with that. I've kind of interpreted, and I'd be happy to hear if you feel a different way. The Seahawks pushed back the roster guarantee deadline with Uchenna Nwosu so that they could negotiate a contract. And what I've taken that to mean is that, he's obviously had some injury issues. What I've taken it to mean is, were they not to have pushed that deadline back, the Seahawks would have released him. It was probably a post-June 1 designation, but they would have released him. Otherwise, they have no leverage. And it doesn't, and with the idea being, of course, Nwosu probably doesn't have a ton of market value right now going into this free agent market with the injury concerns the teams would have about him. Certainly. And also the Seahawks, they're not going to save that much money, but it does seem like the only reason you would push that deadline back is because they would have released him, and they would like to restructure his contract or rework his contract in some way. I don't think there's so much room in it. My suspicion is that the max they'll be able to save is a couple $1 million. The way that it's not nothing, but it's. I don't think it's going to be the way the bonus is structured. I just don't think they're going to save that much money. Anyway, that's to say, you got Derek Hall, you got Boye Mafe. I didn't view edge as a huge need. And then they signed DeMarcus Lawrence. Does this spell the end of Uchenna Nwosu? Maybe. I'm not sure. Because you'd like to see him draft. I think it's one of the few. I think the strongest positions in this draft are interior offensive and defensive line. But I think there's some edge guys that are interesting. And especially some edge guys that I think offer some versatility in this draft, which we're going to look at the draft, folks, every Monday until the draft, and then probably the last week. The last week leading up to the draft, we might do every day. Every weekday, anyway. Or every day that I'm not leaving town to do comedy. So, Sam Darnold, it came out that his contract was 1 year, or is basically a 1 year, $37.5 million guarantee. There's no signing bonus, I think. And then there's a injury guarantee. That's where the $55 million comes in. And I want to say the cap number drops to $27.5 million next year. Is that right? Sam Darnold. I could have had this up. Look, a professional broadcaster would have had this up. Over the cap. Yeah, so no signing bonus as we know of right now. And next year, it's kind of an interesting way to structure it. Because I got to tell you, if I'm Sam Darnold, I might be firing my agent over this contract. Because this gives Sam Darnold no control over his own destiny in the next couple years. And no certainty. No long-term certainty. But it is kind of interesting that to put all the guaranteed money up front in place of a signing bonus as guaranteed salary is interesting. But I cannot imagine advising Sam Darnold to sign this contract. So the Seahawks have all the leverage the next couple of years. $27.5 million they can get out of completely. $35.5 million the following year they can get out of completely. I want to say it's half of whatever adds up to $51 million or whatever it was in guarantees, or is it $55 million? I can't remember, but I think it is $55 million in guarantees for next year, but guaranteed only for injury. So bad performance doesn't count. If he can pass a physical next year, the Seahawks can move on and not pay him a cent, and not have a single cap issue caused by Sam Darnold in 2026. I can't. I think Geno Smith is as good or maybe even slightly better than Sam Darnold. If they're equal, this gives the Seahawks infinitely more flexibility than extending Geno Smith to the deal that he wants, which apparently is between $40 and $45 million, maybe a little more. And I understand why Geno Smith would want that. I can't believe Sam Darnold didn't get it. But it's to me, it feels, there's still anger about Geno Smith being traded. There's still anger about the way that transpired. I feel like both the DK trade and the Seahawks trade, it's good for everybody. DK got a contract I would not have wanted the Seahawks to give him. Geno Smith is probably going to get a contract I would not have wanted the Seahawks to give him. I don't think Sam Darnold is certainly the future, but what I will say is the Seahawks can make that decision. They could draft someone. Now I'm at a point, now that we know this, draft someone in the first round. If they really believe in someone that much. And I'm consistent. I'm intellectually consistent on this idea. The quarterback position is very important. Maybe the most important position in sports. Easily the most important position in football. And teams should be investing more than they are even, and diversifying those investments. What Atlanta did last year, I believed in. If the Seahawks draft a first-round quarterback, they will be criticized and compared to Atlanta. One, it's not as large of an investment. Two, there's not the depth in this class. So whoever you're drafting at 18, there's a very good chance the Seahawks have a second-round grade on that person anyway. So if that's the case, why not take another shot at a cost-controlled player at the very most important position in the sport? I don't want them to draft a quarterback in the first round, per se, but I'd accept it. I'd be happy about it. I wouldn't give it an F grade. I said on this podcast last year when the Falcons drafted Michael Penix that I gave that I would have given it a B minus. I don't go down the draft giving grades, but if I was going to, it's a B minus, B. It's not perfect. It wasn't the pick that I would have made, and I love Michael Penix. I think it's a great spot for Penix, by the way. I mean, obviously, as it turned out, it's been a real path to being able to start relatively quickly and having some interesting targets to throw to. But yeah, this is, I mean, again, if I'm Sam Darnold, I'm pissed at my agent. Obviously, he doesn't seem to be, and he seems pretty confident in his ability to prove himself and to probably stick on these numbers. But I also, one thing I will say with the way this deal is structured, if Sam Darnold comes out and has an amazing year, the Seahawks don't negotiate with quarterbacks or with players until they're on their final year of their deal. And if Darnold is sitting there with $60+ million in flux that's not guaranteed, I could see a Sam Darnold holdout. I'm not forecasting that. I don't know, but I just I don't know what his incentive is to take $10 million less next year without some downstream guarantee. It's also obviously possible we don't know every detail of this contract at this point. A lot of this is speculation. I think that I trust overthecap.com to have pretty good sourcing. So that brings you to DeMarcus Lawrence. They did the kind of same thing where they want this big annual average value, but it turns out it's not as so lucrative is the wrong word, because the money counts the same no matter what if they pay it. But the Seahawks aren't beholden to Lawrence for very long. But what's interesting is, I think more interesting, and what will be... Oh, I wanted to say one more thing about Sam Darnold. One thing that I think is being misreported or misunderstood, and that I was wrong about, and that I actually think takes a little bit away from the Darnold deal to me, is I actually don't think it ends up, the way I understand the contracts, I don't think it ends up being a savings in 2025. I think they saved $31 million by trading Geno Smith, but they still, against the cap, they still owe his prorated signing bonus. And then they paid Darnold $37.5 million. That's $6.5 million more spent on the quarterback position in 2025, by my math, than they would have if they just kept Geno. Again, I'm saying this with the full knowledge. Geno decided he didn't want to be here. requested a trade. I think it's the best move for the team overall. Darnold's younger. Some would argue he's better. I'd argue they're comparable. It's not a savings in 2025. It's probably a savings in 26-27 if you keep him. And it's especially a savings, by the way, if he craters and the Seahawks want to move on from him completely, which they probably would not have been able to do on a deal they signed Geno Smith to. But anyway, so Cooper Kupp. Speculation was coming out that Cooper Kupp wanted $12 million, $13 million, and I think like the initial reaction from everybody was like, "Ooh, that's too much for a guy his age and with his injury history, a guy that's missed one of every 3 games that he's been scheduled to play as of late." And when the number came out at 3 years, $45 million, everybody around that does not like the Seahawks started doing victory laps. Seahawks fans, I think, were rightfully a little bit worried that this was the actual amount of money that the Seahawks were going to end up paying Kupp, and I would just hesitate to react too strongly still until we get the guaranteed money. And I just want to pull up just in case, because I'm now traumatized by the DeMarcus Lawrence news breaking as I was recording. Checking the less and less reliable X. Yeah, so I still don't see guaranteed money. I would bet that this is a thing that looks like a 3-year, $45 million contract and is more like in line with something like a 3-year, something that's a $12 million a year contract for 2 years or something like that. If that's 2 years, $24 million, whatever. And you can feel how you want about that. I understand people doubting Cooper Kupp, and I'm not even completely immune to the idea that he's not different enough from Jackson Smith and Jigba. Like, he's a little bit just like a worse version of Jackson Smith and Jigba. That I don't like. They're not going to have a ton of diversity of play style at the receiver position right now, at least in the starting 2, the guys that are going to be playing the most downs. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, which I used to work with a woman named Marquita, but her name was spelled like Spanish pronunciation would be Marquita. Yeah, so Marquez Valdes-Scantling is now I'm like, you know when you say a word too many times and you like lose the thread on Marquez Valdes-Scantling. I was like, it's not Marquez. Yeah, Marquez Valdes-Scantling. He's a different style of player, but I think that it's just, we're going to have to get used to this idea, this like kind of older school style of West Coast offense, like something that's closer to, and this is the thing that makes me a little bit skeptical of Clint Kubiak and why I'm not full steam ahead enthusiastic about Clint Kubiak, is like, it's going to kind of go back to the Holmgren era. Like, and I don't want to besmirch. I loved Gary Kubiak. I'm not, but the game has evolved from Gary Kubiak. The game has evolved from Mike Shanahan. And I don't know. There's a part of me that feels like this philosophy, if the Seahawks are not super aggressive and super disruptive on defense, and then they do this run first, kind of conservative West Coast style offense with, a fullback on the roster and not very many 3 receiver sets, and like kind of try to turn the clock back into the late 90s, early 2000s. No matter how good either side of the ball is, they're just going to be limited to 10 wins or less. There's part of me that worries about that. I'm excited to see 2 guys who have been billed historically as slot receivers both play outside and just be very good route runners and see how that works out. But I'm a little wary. I'm wary to predict a huge successful season from the Seahawks because of that. By the way, Kupp is like still got it. The idea that he's fully washed. And can I tell you how much it hurts I'm 38, and I knew I was 38 this morning before I looked into Cooper Kupp a little bit more. I was aware that I was 38 years old, but to have people be like, this guy's washed, he sucks, he's done, his career's over, and go like, oh yeah, that guy was born like a different decade than I was. He was born in 1993. I was born in 1986. Just a brutal realization to see Cooper Kupp is washed. I don't think he's washed. He's been productive when he's been healthy the last 3 years, including last year. Is he going to come out and catch 120 balls? Nah, obviously not. But could he catch conceivably 80 balls and sniff at 1,000 yards? I think so. I think that's possible. And then before we get into, we're going to do a mock draft simulator again today, because why not? Because every Monday, I suppose. Should we do it on Tuesdays? I don't know. It's like eating tacos on a Wednesday, right? We'll get into that, but Tevin Jenkins is in town, who's, speaking of injured guys, a guy who has never played a full season, a full slate of games, played 14 games last year, so it's not like he's out there playing 6-game seasons every year. He did play played 14 games last year. He is certainly in the like second or third tier of free agent offensive linemen that were available at the beginning of free agency. But I guess philosophically, it's not great oftentimes to win free agency, to quote unquote win free agency, because oftentimes what that means is your favorite team is out overpaying for players, whose drafting teams, in a lot of cases, most cases, have decided that they are not worth the money they want. So there's some selection bias as to who hits free agency, right? It's very rare that a true generational talent just hits free agency raw. That's rare. What's most common is a guy's coming off of an injury, or maybe he's actually like an upper third or mid third guy, or he wants too much money, or he's unhappy, or he plays a position the team doesn't value, etc. So the guys that are getting to free agency are not, like, already have a strike against them as far as I'm concerned, including Sam Darnold, obviously. Like, Sam Darnold was bad for the first 6 years of his career, whatever it was, 5 years of his career. And he still is young enough that he was able to have a good single season in Minnesota, but he's got strikes against him. Of course. DeMarcus Lawrence is old and he was injured. Old, washed, 32-year-old guy. Cooper Kupp, been injured a bunch the last couple seasons. He's aging. So the idea that your team should go out and pay top dollar, reset the market on guards, if that's what your team needs, I don't love that. But what I will say is, Mekhi Becton, a guy that I liked a lot, goes to San Diego. No, not San Diego. That's the hardest one. Changing from Oakland to Vegas and Oakland to LA before that, and back to Oakland and then to Vegas, those are tough. The San Diego Chargers to the Los Angeles Chargers, even harder. Mekhi Becton goes to LA for 2 years, $20 million. I'd be thrilled if that was, if Tevin Jenkins signs that deal, I'd be thrilled. Especially when you're talking about a guy that's never played a full season. You got to imagine that's like the starting point is Maybe for both sides, by the way. 2 years, $10 million. And I'd be stoked on that. I preferred Becton. He's younger. I think he's more interesting athletically. He's enormous and has managed to play in like zone schemes and move a fair amount. He's a freak. I like the upside of a freak on a football team. But I guess these are like the two alternate reality scenarios, right? You keep DK Metcalf, sign him to the deal that he was on. I'm not sure what the cap situation looks like, what the cap situation would look like as far as guarantees, but let's say he stayed here, and what I want to say was like a $31 million cap number. Maybe it comes down a little bit. Geno, he signs an extension. His cap number comes down a little bit, probably not that much. And then you may not have the opportunity or the flexibility to sign a guard of Tevin Jenkins' quality, to sign a receiver of Cooper Kupp's quality, to sign an edge rusher of DeMarcus Lawrence's quality. And would you rather have Geno and DK or the offseason the Seahawks are putting together and will continue to put together as time goes on? It's really hard to say right now because when you go to over the cap, they don't have the updated contracts because these goddamn agents are obscuring this number because they don't want you to know that they are lying, basically. But for me, it's like, that's very easy. Also, would you rather have, now this one's tough. Would you rather have Drew Dahlman, 3 years, I think it was 3 years, $42 million, is that right? $16 million a year average, wait. Hold on. Drew Dahlman. $18 million, no, my math is all crazy. $14 million a year average, is that right? I think it's 14. I think I just did remedial math poorly on this podcast. 3 years, $42 million for Drew Dahlman. If you believe in Drew Dahlman, I'd rather have that. Apparently, there was a team that was offering him more money. He didn't take it. If that's the Seahawks, I don't know what you can do. How much you got to pay a guy? Same with Will Fries. Like, Will Fries, coming off of a tibia injury, I believe he's the only 5-year contract that's been signed in free agency. The Seahawks wanted a physical. They were going to offer him the same salary, wanted a physical, and wanted it to be a 3-year contract. Now, in 2 years, do you think there's a chance that the Seahawks might be happy they didn't sign a guy coming off of a broken tibia to a 5-year contract with a huge signing bonus? Of course. There's a large chance of that. So I understand the frustration with the front office, and I do think a lot of this is going to hinge on, crazy that the Seahawks have put themselves in a position where Tevin Jenkins may make or break fan perception of their offseason. But if they sign Tevin Jenkins and they address the immediate need, interior offensive line, by spending money on a guy that should be like a plug-in starter day one, if they do that, and then they were able to do all these other things, get younger without getting worse, without getting significantly worse at quarterback, and completely wipe out all commitments beyond 2025 while still retaining the ability to keep that quarterback beyond 2025, so better is, I think, not what I would describe Cooper Kupp compared to DK Metcalf. I do think DK Metcalf is a special player. I also think that he would have struggled to do what the Seahawks need him to do in this offense. And so again, this is a good thing. It was a good thing for DK Metcalf, in my opinion. Like, DK got what he wanted. DK got paid a shitload of money. Am I sad that I'm sad that I won't get to watch him every Sunday? Of course. But if you're a Seattle sports fan for very long, you've gotten used to players that you love or that are fun to watch, the teams moving on from them or the players moving on from the city, okay? I don't expect every fan to be just like all business, just think of things as all business, but I mean, you got to be used to it at this point, right? So is Cooper Kupp better than DK Metcalf? I don't think so, but he's probably a better player in Seattle in 2025 than DK Metcalf would have been, which maybe those words will come back to bite me. Maybe, and also, I mean, Metcalf has such amazing athletic gifts that he's been able to like be so productive without being a crisp and precise route runner. And while just making absolute fuck ups mentally on a regular basis. Also, by the way, it seems like George Pickens is going to be on the move. So not only will DK Metcalf get to keep number 14 potentially, but doesn't have to be, he might get to be the only lunatic in the wide receiver room. I don't even think DK is that big of a lunatic, by the way. I think it's unfair to group him and Pickens together. And DK plays hard. But anyway, if you're a team that's on the verge but not there yet, to get younger, to get cheaper, and arguably better, I don't understand why people are frustrated by it. We'll do a quick Tevin Jenkins X search real quick to see if I'm missing any news. By the way, Seahawks Twitter is very good. Oh, this is from a nobody account 7 hours ago. Sources tell me the Seahawks and Tevin Jenkins are close to a 3-year contract. It'll pay him between $3 and $14 million. This is from CJ999, whoever the fuck that is. Somebody spotted Tevin Jenkins at SeaTac. It's not a secret that he came to Seattle. All right, so it looks like Tevin Jenkins is not signed yet. We'll check again by the end of the podcast to make sure that we don't miss it. Because I don't know if I'll be able to do a podcast tomorrow. So I'm trying to do more of them as we approach the draft. But what was the last couple things I wanted to talk about are just the Seahawks were in on Aaron Rodgers, it sounds like, and Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers now are left to be the last guy at the dance, waiting for a dance partner. They used to be the cutest boys or the prettiest girls, depending on what part of this analogy you'd like to glom onto. And now they're not as desirable. And it's interesting, and it's obviously, I think, for Seahawks fans who had to watch the Seahawks play against Aaron Rodgers many times, and fans who were angry at Russell Wilson for the way he handled his departure in Seattle. It's sweet. I understand that. I've been on record many times saying I'm rooting for Russ at this point. No hard feelings left on my end. Him leaving is arguably the only thing that kept Pete Carroll around for as long as possible because it reinvigorated the talent pool in Seattle. I will say the Rodgers interest, even if it was just to kind of push the Sam Darnold deal along. The other thing is, by the way, Rodgers is rumored to be a target for Minnesota also, which, I mean, this has been a joke for many years, the idea that he would go from Green Bay to the Jets and the Jets to Minnesota, just like Brett Favre did. But what would Minnesota be thinking? Like, you drafted the first-round rookie last year. I know he got hurt. I know J.J. McCarthy didn't get to play. But what it tells me that the Seahawks were in on Rodgers is they were committed to not – this is a weird sentence. They were committed to not making a big commitment this offseason because, one, I think they're going to draft a quarterback. They're probably going to draft a quarterback relatively high. I wouldn't be surprised, now that we know the details of the Sam Darnold contract, to see it happen in the first round. And I think it's going to happen day 2 at the latest, would be my guess. I think they're going to draft someone who becomes the presumptive starter of the future. But without having to, they'll keep Sam Darnold as long as they need him. and pay him okay to keep him. My guess is if he gets through 2026 without an extension, there's no way he's playing on that final year of that contract. Whether it's a trade or whatever, there's no way he's playing on the final year of that contract. But that's what I would guess. Is they're going to try to they're going to try to draft the future starting quarterback of this franchise, and I think it's happening earlier than they're probably, by the way, quarterbacks always end up moving up. With the exception of the Kenny Pickett, Malik Willis year, quarterbacks very often move up in the draft. Obviously, last year is no exception, but I mean, there's been many years that the big one I remember is the year that, what was his name? Brandon Weeden got drafted in the first round. Is that right? Like a 28-year-old rookie or something like that. Brandon Weeden. Somehow, Cooper Kupp is 32, is 31, but Brandon Weeden is only 41 years old. Yeah, first round, 22nd pick. Your Cleveland Browns, if I recall correctly. Anyway, I wouldn't have been as upset as some people about Aaron Rodgers coming to Seattle. It would have been very interesting. It would have been very compelling. It would have been chaos no matter what. And I'm not someone that's like trying to measure team chemistry. And I also think, by the way, that the opinion of Aaron Rodgers is not shared. It's not a full overlap between what's on social media and among fans and players in the NFL. That became the most clear to me, by the way, when Deshaun Watson got traded to the Browns, got a huge contract, and there were players openly celebrating Deshaun Watson with no reservations. I don't think the opinion of Aaron Rodgers is nearly as bad among NFL players as it is among fans. It would have been very interesting, but I'm very happy with the way the Seahawks have handled the quarterback position outside of I would have liked to see a couple more draft picks over the last decade, but they've never pinned themselves into a corner. And they seemed committed to not doing it again, which is what I predicted. So that's part of the reason I'm happy about it, but also just for like the long-term future of the franchise. Don't give that job to anyone until they earn it. Okay, let's do this. Oh, one other thing. I keep doing one other thing. Jamar Chase signed. T. Higgins also signed, both to huge contracts. Jamar Chase becomes the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history. And then, what was the dude's name Derek Stingley signed the largest contract for a cornerback ever, reset the market for cornerbacks. For Seahawks fans, that's ominous because you got Jackson Smith and Jigba approaching. The Seahawks should have team control of him for the next 3 years if they want it. Outside of injury, he seems like he's going to continue to be a productive receiver in the NFL. He seems system agnostic, which is valuable to me. Certainly a step down from Jamar Chase, but that doesn't really matter. So in 3 years, if Jackson Smith and Jigba puts together 300 catches and 4,000 yards and 25 touchdowns in the next 3 years, are the Seahawks going to go, well, you're not Jamar Chase? No, it's going to be the next guy up. That's how it works. Has CeeDee Lamb ever been the best receiver in the NFL? Probably not. But at one point, I believe he had the largest contract of any receiver because he was the next guy up to sign the biggest contract. We saw it with quarterbacks. Josh Allen bucked that trend, by the way. I have an idea for something that I'm going to work on to figure out like how to quantify how good the Seahawks, or bad, but how good the Seahawks have handled the quarterback position in the, I guess now you'd have to call it the post Mike Holmgren or the post Jim Mora era. From the time Pete Carroll took over, from the time John Schneider took over until now, how well they've handled the quarterback position in a way that's quantifiable. So, but we'll talk about that later. So let's do this. This mock draft. Should I have committed to doing it on here? I've said it too many times to not do it now, or should I have made it tomorrow's podcast episode? I guess maybe I'll release them. Yeah, we'll figure that all out. We'll figure that out in post. All right. So let's go to our. Today we are going to use the mock draft database simulator. One of the things I like about this simulator is it includes data from a bunch of different sources. I'm a big wisdom of the crowds believer. To a degree, that's what I think PFF is, although I think PFF has a certain analytical bent. I probably trust their subjective rankings more than I trust anywhere else, even though I don't think they're perfect, but I trust them more than anyone else. And this mock draft database is considering a bunch of different sources. So we'll get into it right now. I got criticized on the last one for not starting fast enough, which was, I thought, a pretty valid. Like the guy said 11. He timestamped it and it said 11 minutes in makes the first pick. Valid. I should have slowed this down. Now we're slowing this down, folks, because who knows what. We're slowing it down. Come on. We're gonna restart it. Oh, I put an ad blocker on just now because the one thing I will say about mock draft database is a lot of pop-ups, but it is funny when they guilt you. They're like, oh, you're gonna continue without supporting us. Thank you so much. Do we have the Seahawks selected? We'll go back. We're going to go slow so that we can talk in between them. I'm going to try to not make my first pick be 11 minutes into going through the simulation. Okay. So, as I've said, we're going to use this as though this is real life. We're not going to try to interpret the world through a different lens of what we think might be reality. And while I certainly I'm not going to use, and I'm not going to do any trades either, but let's look at what the trades show. Yeah, a lot of times the thing doesn't, if I was going to take one of these trades, it would be this Denver trade. But one, I don't think there's a player here that Denver's given up half of their 2026 draft for. And, I'm just not, it just complicates things. So, I don't think Tyler Warren's available, but I will say, like, I'm not. It's supposed to be a good tight end class. There's not a tight end in the group that I'm like in love with yet. Maybe Colston Loveland. Maybe he could win my love, but there's nobody that I've found yet that I'm like deeply in love with. I think the Seahawks, by the way, one of the things they've done, if they signed Tevin Jenkins and if they, having signed Cooper Kupp, they're no longer, they're not like pushed into making a need-based draft pick. They can pick best player available. If Tyler Warren falls here, I think they would consider it, but I would like to think this is a team that's not drafting a tight end in the first round when they have, I would say they don't have a ton of stars on the roster. And I think you want a shot at a star. That's kind of the way that I would view the first 4 or 5 rounds of the draft is I want the guy, very often I want the guy that's got the best you want the guy with the best combination of floor and ceiling, but I want the guy with the highest ceiling. I think Kenneth Grant makes a ton of sense here. I'm not a Tyler Booker believer. If he gets drafted by the Seahawks, I'll be very compelled as to how they're going to use him, but the measurables worry me. I think I got to take Kenneth Grant here. Got a B+, fine. I also, just so you know, I don't want to assume that people don't know this. Kenneth Grant would play a different role on that defense than Byron Murphy. They're both defensive tackles or interior defensive linemen or whatever, but Kenneth Grant's going to play nose tackle, and Byron Murphy is an end in a 3-4. So we just saw, I don't know if you're watching closely, if you're watching this, Gray Zabel almost made it to Seattle. And that's actually one of the things I was going to bring up, because the There's some idea that the Seahawks will trade up. I'm going to read this. I want to read this list of guys. I went through what I think is the entire Seahawks under John Schneider. Everybody they've traded up for at all in the draft. Period. I could be wrong on this, but I think these are all the trades up on draft day. And the criteria is like, it's not players involved, but like they're clearly trading up to draft a player. Jesse Williams was the, I believe, Australian rugby player, was very injured. I think Alabama, never had a meaningful NFL career in Seattle to my recollection. So they traded up for Tyler Lockett. That's the big win. Although, by the way, talking about not trading your whole draft away, is this right? Did they not? What fuck is that right? 95, 112, 167, and 181 for Tyler Lockett. Did they get something else in that deal? Tyler Lockett trade Seattle. I don't know if I can get to it quickly. That's a lot to give up, to move up. That's conviction that you like Tyler Lockett. 2016, they traded for Jaron Reed. Not bad. 2016, they also traded up. So that was from 56 to 49. They traded up. They gave a 2017 fourth round pick and the 225th overall pick for Quentin Jefferson and the 232nd pick. Draft of Quentin Jefferson. That's all right. I don't think that's there's a lot of hurt there. 2018, they traded up for Michael Dixon, which is interesting. I don't remember the feeling at the time, but in general, even drafting kickers and punters is kind of controversial. Trading up to draft one, but Dixon's been great. It's hard to argue with the results. Dixon's been great. I guess the Seahawks were worried that somewhere between 149 and 146 Dixon would go. 2019, they traded for DK Metcalf. Great trade. 2020, they traded up for Darrell Taylor, which certainly does not look great in the moment. And then in 2021, they trade up two post 200 plus overall picks for Stone Forsythe. So it's a mixed bag. I think if the Seahawks trade up, it seems like there's a pretty good chance it's someone they have a strong conviction on. But again, I think if we got to the point where I want to say it was like pick 47 or 48 on here was Gray Zabel, do I think that they probably consider Gray Zabel there or consider trading up for Gray Zabel significantly earlier than that? Absolutely. I'm going to take, I don't think Josh Connerly is going to be, oh shit. There's two guys I like here a lot. Josh Connerly, I think, is a guy that has potential to play tackle and could take reps at guard in 2025. Donovan Jackson. But these are guys that people are going to tell you they're not going to be available, but you'll hear people say that there's 40 guys that won't be available at 18, and only 17 guys can be taken before pick 18. So Jackson Dart went in this draft already, right? They don't have him some outlier. I like Josh Connerly. Donovan Jackson I like less. And then Landon Jackson. So I'm going to say because Connerly and Donovan Jackson are both available and one of them's guaranteed to him at 52, I'm going to take Landon Jackson, who has elite measurables. And then what does it turn out? Yeah, so Connerly goes in between. We'll take Donovan Jackson. Easy pick there. Landon Jackson's a guy that I will be curious to see if he starts sneaking up draft boards. Maybe he's not going to be available at 50, but he's a guy that if the Seahawks took him at 18, it would feel like a reach, but a guy that I really believe will be a strong NFL player. You know, you can decide where you think they should start taking edge rushers. To me, second round makes a ton of sense. If Landon Jackson's available at 50, I'm going to be screaming at my TV if they don't draft him. And yeah, okay, are we back? We're back on the clock. I don't get the fascination with Jack Besh. And I know that he's got the tragic, his brother passed away in the in the New Orleans terrorist attack. I'm not I'm sympathetic to that. There's nothing that pops off the screen to me, which maybe is just me. This could be just me being an ignorant evaluator, amateur evaluator. I like Jalen Noel more. Is there anyone here that's like, well, this says anonymous YouTuber says, hello, my peps, yo. I hope that's not you didn't just trick me into saying a racial slur. I'm going Jalen Noel. That seems like. By the way, Demetrius Knight has been kind of up and down these draft boards. Again, I think by re-signing Ernest Jones, the Seahawks aren't forced to draft a linebacker, but there's going to be. He's a guy that I could see the Seahawks reaching on by perception. And, when they drafted Bobby Wagner, when they drafted Cam Chancellor, like there's a bunch of these defensive guys that have been called reaches that have turned into really good players. People were like, yeah, Bobby Wagner cannot play. He's like not big enough to play. And by the way, I think Bobby Wagner probably put on 20 pounds plus in his career of like good weight, of muscle, but like Bobby Wagner does not look small on the field to me anymore. So if the Seahawks are interested in Demetrius Knight and they draft Demetrius Knight, I would expect that guy to be getting significant snaps and be pretty damn good. But they don't have to draft anyone. Again, that's how I think that's the spot they've put themselves in. So I'm drafting Jalen Noel. We'll stop filibustering on that. Good. We're getting good grades this time around. And I think, by the way, that this range, 82 to 92, these two picks that the Seahawks have, this is where I would start looking at quarterbacks. And I didn't take one there because Tyler Shuck still available. When did Quinn Ewers go? Hold on. Ewers goes at 68 in this draft to the Raiders, which is tragic. That hurts my feelings. But can I say, mock draft database, can you get something to scroll more easily along this? So then you go, would I have rather had? I mean, I think I want Donovan Jackson more than I want Quinn Ewers, considering Tyler Shuck in this draft is available here. But this is like Tyler Shuck to me is the last presumptive starter guy. I'm interested in Curtis Rourke. And that might be the last. Yeah, I think if you're going to take a quarterback in this draft, Tyler Shuck at 92. One, you're happy about it. And two, it's like the last guy you're excited about. Demetrius Knight just went. I've gotten too used to the PFF one because I kind of thought that that Ewers would stick around till 92. He didn't even make it to 82. So now, who are you rooting for? Ooh, Oladejo just went. I love Savion Williams, and he just goes. Savion Williams is interesting. He's rushed the ball. He's a very versatile player. He played quarterback in high school, so wildcat quarterback that actually is a threat to throw the ball, rushed the ball a bunch of times, big target. Dan Viens, a friend of the podcast, compared him to Sidney Rice and shared a couple videos. I loved Sidney Rice. There's maybe no signing the Seahawks have ever made that I've supported more than signing Sidney Rice. Savion Williams, that's a great comparison. It's like if Sidney Rice could also throw the ball a little bit. He could I think Sidney Rice he had a couple passes, right? But anyway. We're not even making trades. I don't know why I'm looking at this. So this is a spot. Danny Stutzman, Chris Paul Jr. I'm not going to tell you that I know which one is like a perfect fit in Seattle. I would be considering either of those guys. Those are guys that I'm interested in. Is there Jackson Slater is a guy that Dan Viens had on his podcast, by the way. Go check that out. A guy he's a Bellevue native, Sacramento State guard, can play center. Interesting. Man. I'm also curious where Kobe King is interesting. I like Kobe King is listed as a safety most places. So another question that I have is, do the Seahawks believe Devin Witherspoon is the Kyle Hamilton of this defense? Not to say good enough to be Kyle Hamilton, or do they need a guy who's a little bit bigger, who's Devin Witherspoon does a lot of stuff. Can he hold up playing the run from the inside for that long? I got to do a little more looking at Kobe King, but I know he's listed as isn't he listed as a safety other places? Am I wrong? The other thing about mock draft database is you can't click and get like attributes. Kobe King, safety. Is he being... Am I crazy? Kobe King, PFF. Maybe I've just been around. Maybe I've just been looking at this for too long. No, he's a linebacker. Who am I thinking of? Who's the safety that I'm thinking of? Well, I'm glad I didn't take him. We're gonna take Chris Paul Jr. just for the name. Gotta accumulate the good names. Seahawks have historically had a lot of very good names. Danny Stutzman, I'm not. These guys are like virtually the same to me. I have no, and they're ranked very closely on here. I just spilled down the front of my shirt. By the way, like I said, come see me at Tacoma Comedy Club, 6th and Proctor location tonight, St. Patrick's Day. I'll be consuming alcohol on stage. You can't stop me. Elijah Roberts is interesting. The SMU, there's a couple SMU guys that are pretty interesting to me. I just want to make sure that I don't want to miss the chance. Brashard, oh, here we go. This is where the draft is. No. Brashard Smith is available. So this dude, Brashard Smith, converted receiver that plays running back. This is up my alley. The dude, Jalen Warren, that got drafted by the Dolphins, I believe is also a converted receiver. I love a receiver converted to running back. I also think that's so Mike Robinson, if you recall, I believe was like early college quarterback, spends some time at receiver, ends up as a running back and then a fullback. Like, I love a guy that can. So I think the Seahawks are probably going to draft a running back. I think I think Kenny McIntosh is done after this year. I don't think there's any reason that you think you shouldn't take a look at one of these running backs. George Halani, there's no reason to commit to George Halani. There's no reason to commit to Kenny McIntosh. Obviously, you have Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet for now. Kenneth Walker, is he 1 year left on his deal? Is that right? Let's see. I think he's got 1 year left on his deal. Yeah. And then he becomes, so he's an unrestricted free agent after 2025. So I think the Seahawks are going to draft for depth and talent here. I'm taking Brashard Smith, guy, great measurables, converted receiver. I love that. I don't think there's I'm not the guy to evaluate running backs, but I've been in the running backs don't matter camp. And Elijah Roberts, my memory is also great measurables. But let's pull up Elijah Roberts on the combine. Especially when you get to the end of the draft, what I think the Seahawks have done a very good job of is not drafting so Elijah Roberts was 6'4", 285. So you're getting into that, like, this is what I think the Seahawks are going to be looking for, are guys that have scheme versatility, that can play in multiple different fronts. And so 6'4", 285, ran a 4.78. 10-yard split is 167. This isn't a 31.5-inch vertical. This is not incredible for a guy who's 6'5", 245. But a guy who's 285 pounds, big hands, long arms, that can move that fast is interesting. I don't have, like, beyond that, I'm like, I've said many times, I'm relying on the aggregation of other people's scouting reports. I'm not grinding tape. I'm taking Elijah Roberts. And that's even, by the way, after drafting Landon Jackson and Kenneth Grant earlier. That's a lot of defensive linemen, a lot of pass rushers. Not worried about it. I think Elijah Roberts compares, and I say this in a positive light, to Draymond Jones, a guy who can play in a couple different spots and be confusing. If you got a guy that had Draymond Jones' production, which was not great, but you got him in the 4th or 5th round of the NFL draft instead of paying him the largest contract the Seahawks had given out to that point, I don't think you're so upset about it. At this point, I mean, you'd love to come out of this draft with a tight end. I think Upton Stout's an interesting guy, listed at safety at some places, corner at other places. Again, this is the kind of guy who maybe gets underappreciated in the NFL these days. Did Upton Stout, so interesting thing about Upton Stout, let's see. Small school guy, plays at North Texas and Western Kentucky. Why is there a picture of a Michigan player when you go to Upton Stout's, if you search him on Google Image? Let's see here. You know, the guy that I was sad the Seahawks didn't get a shot at last year was Mike Sanderstill. He seemed like such an interesting guy, and a guy that could have certainly been I mean, they had a shot at him. They could have drafted him in the first round, but I don't think he made it to them in the second round. I don't know enough about Jake Majors. The kid at the center class doesn't seem great once you get past the guys who are like guards or tackles that you think can play center. I like Ricky White. We missed out on Savion Williams. Should we keep dragging out the end of this draft? Or I'm hoping I can find the guy. There's a guy that I like at the end of the draft that, man, do we take? I'm agonizing this over more than anyone should over the end of this on a simulated draft, but I think I'm going to take Jalen Conyers, just on athletic profile and upside alone, and because I'd like to see a tight end drafted A+. The sim likes it. That's good. And a pet guy for me, Jabbar Muhammad, is still available. He's ranked 209th here. I think PFF has him like 277th or something like that. Man. You know who we're going to take? Because we didn't. So Dante Thornton is a guy, I'd suspect that he will get drafted earlier, but again, it's how many guys can you suspect will get drafted earlier before the guy's in the exact right spot. Dante Thornton, I believe, did he run the fastest? So runs a 4.3 at 6'5", 205. 33-inch vertical. This is not DK Metcalf, but is this Marquez Valdez-Scantling? An early career, cheaper version. That's not sexy. It's the last pick the Seahawks have in this simulated draft. or do you take Jabbar Muhammad? I'm going to take Dante Thornton, and I'm going to assume Seahawks signed a cornerback today. We're taking Thornton. We're moving on with our lives, getting past this. We'll see. Do we get a final grade? I don't think we get any kind of final grade. This is what our draft looks like when it's all said and done. Kenneth Grant in the first round, Landon Jackson in the second round, Donovan Jackson also in the second round. If that's the Seahawks' first 3 picks, by the way, I'm GM of the year, okay? I want you to know that. Jalen Noel, Tyler Shuck at 82.90. I'm cranking out GM of the year placards left and right for myself. Chris Paul, I got a good grade. I'm not as convicted about it. I like Brashard Smith a lot, a guy that I will have that will be a guy that I'm interested in. And after that, these are shots in the dark, which is kind of what they are in real life anyway. But Dante Thornton's the only guy I'm convicted on. All right, thank you guys, everybody who watched. Come see me do stand-up tonight, if you would, please. And, whatever. I love you. Please keep watching, and I'll talk to you later in the